Welcome back to the Cozy Rosy Crochet channel, where today I'm going to be sharing with you how to crochet this filet crochet star pattern as part of the Jolly Holiday blanket. Now before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and of course the notification bell so that you never miss out another one of my crochet patterns or tutorials again. Just like all the other panels I've been making for the Jolly Holiday blanket, I'm going to be using this Paintbox Yarns Simply Aran, which is a size 4 yarn and 100% acrylic. Now the shade that I'm using is shade number 226, which is a slate green for this tutorial, and then I've edged all my panels with champagne white, which is shade number 202. The recommended hook size is a 5mm hook for this yarn, but I've gone up to a 5.5mm hook to give a little bit more drape in this blanket to make it extra snuggly. Gather your materials and let's get started. With your slip knot on your hook, we're going to begin by making a chain of 66. We just yarn over and pull through to create our chain, and we need a total of 66 chains, remembering the loop on our hook does not count as a chain. Make your chain of 66 and I'll see you in a moment. And 66. When you have your chain of 66, we're going to start by working into that fourth chain from hook. So that's, this loop doesn't count. 1, 2, 3, there's number 4, and we're going to go underneath just the top loop of our chain, because we're going to be working into the other side of our chain when we add our edging. So we're going to yarn over the hook, ready to work a US double crochet into that fourth chain from hook, and a US double crochet is the same as a UK treble crochet. So we yarn over, working into that fourth chain from hook, underneath that top loop, we yarn over, bring a loop up, so we have 3 loops, yarn over to pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the next 2. We're then going to work 1 US double crochet into each chain across. So we're going to work into each chain, working 1 US double crochet, the same as a UK treble crochet. At the end of row 1, you're going to have a stitch count of 64. That's because this chain 3 that we've skipped at the beginning will count as our first double crochet of the row. So continue to work across, working 1 double crochet into each chain, and I'll meet you at the end of row 1. So at the end of row 1 you should have a total stitch count of 64, remembering that those skip chains count as our first chain. Going into row 2, we're going to start by making a turning chain of 3, so we yarn over and pull through 3 times. And now this turning chain of 3 counts as our first double crochet in row 2. Because this stitch counts, we don't work into that top of that first stitch. We're going to work our second stitch into the next, and for row 2 we're simply going to work 1 double crochet into each stitch across. So we're going to maintain our stitch count of 64, and I'm going to meet you back where our turning chain from our previous row is. I'm getting tangled already because we need to make sure we work into our turning chain. So work 1 US double crochet into each stitch across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 2. Once you've worked across all of those stitches, working 1 US double crochet into each stitch, we're going to find ourselves with our turning chain. So to maintain our stitch count of 64, we need to work 1 extra double crochet into the top of our turning chain of 3. And it is really important to try and get your hook through that very top chain, because that will really help to keep your edges nice and neat, and it will make adding your edging that little bit easier when we get to that part of the pattern. So for rows 3 and 4, we're going to be repeating row 2. So we make that turning chain of 3, then working into the next stitch and across, we're working 1 double crochet into each stitch across, and of course remembering to work that extra double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So repeat row 2 twice. You'll then have a total row count of 4, and I'll meet you for row 5. So at the end of row 4 you should still have a stitch count of 64 stitches, including that turning chain of 3. Going into row 5, we're going to start our filet crochet pattern. We start with our turning chain of 3. We are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 9 stitches. So that's 1, 2 and 9. We are then going to make a chain of 2, so yarn over, pull through once and twice. Because we've chained 2, we skip the next 2 stitches and yarn over, ready to work, 1 double crochet into the next. So we skip 1, skip 2, and then insert our hook to work a double crochet. We then chain 2 again, skip the next 2 stitches, and this time we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 34. So we yarn over, skip 1, skip 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 34. Now these skip 2s and chain 2s, they're what create the open blocks in our filet crochet. So each time we chain 2, we skip 2 underneath. So from here we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 34. This was number 1, so I'm going on to number 2, and we're carrying on until we've worked 1 double crochet into each of the next 34. So that's 4, 5, and that's number 34. Once you've worked 1 double crochet into each of the next 34, we're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, we've yarned over, skip 1, skip 2, ready to work, 1 double crochet into the next. We are then going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, yarn over, skip 1, skip 2, ready to work, 1 double crochet into each of the next 9 stitches. That's 2. These 9 double crochets will take us back to our turning chain. So work those 9 double crochets and I will meet you there. And this is number 9. Once you've worked those 9 double crochets, we then need to work 1 double crochet into the top of our turning chain again, just to maintain that stitch count of 64. So we have 2 open blocks on each side, and that's the start of our filet crochet pattern for our star. Going into row 6, we begin with our turning chain of 3. We are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 9. So that's 1, 2, 3, and that's number 9. So number 9 should bring you back to the stitch just before your first open block. We are going to make our chain of 2. So we skip that chain 2 block, and this time when we're ready to yarn over, we skip the chain 2. We're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 7. So the first one goes into the top of the stitch between those open blocks, and then we're going to work 2 stitches into our chain 2 space. So we yarn over, and you can simply insert into that chain 2 space for number 1, yarn over and insert back into that chain 2 space for number 2. You can adjust their positioning if it feels like they're a little bit out of line, but don't worry too much about that. So we've done 1, 2 and 3, so we need to do a further 4 to get those 7 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4. So let me just double check myself. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. We're then going to make a chain of 2. I'm going to yarn over ready, skip 1, skip 2, insert into the next, and this time we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. So that's 2, 3, 4. So continue to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches, and I'll meet you for our next open block. And this is number 22. Once we've worked those 22 double crochets, we're going to make our chain of 2, yarn over ready, skip 1, skip 2, ready to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 7. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're then going to work into our chain space for number 5 and number 6, and number 7 goes into that stitch in between the 2 open blocks. We're then going to make our chain of 2, skip the chain 2 space before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 9, which will bring us back to our turning chain, where we need to work that additional double crochet into the top of it. This is number 9. So all that's left to do is to work 1 double crochet into the top of our turning chain. So we still have 4 open blocks at the end of row 6. This time they're a little bit more spaced out. Now row 7 is simply a repeat of row 2, so we're going to chain 3 and work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across, so that we maintain our stitch count of 64. So make your chain of 3 and work 1 double crochet into each chain and stitch across, and I will meet you ready for row 8. It's important not to forget working into the top of your turning chain as well at the end of row 7. So perhaps I'll meet you at the end of row 7. I'll see you there. So I'm just working my final double crochet into the top of my turning chain for row 7. Going into row 8, we start with our turning chain of 3. We are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. That's 2, 3, and number 12. We're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10 stitches, and that's 2, 3, and 10. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, and we're repeating that for a further 2 times. So we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10, and 10, chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, and we repeat it for a 3rd time, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10, and 10. We chain 2, we skip 2 before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches, which takes us back to our turning chain, where we need to work that additional double crochet into the top of that chain 3. Just working my final double crochet into the top of my turning chain, and at the end of row 8 we still have 4 open blocks, but once again they've moved position. Going into row 9, we're repeating row 2 once again, working our turning chain of 3 before working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across, and of course into the top of that turning chain to maintain that stitch count of 64. So complete row 9, repeating row 2 once again, and I'll meet you for row 10. So at the end of row 9, you should still have your stitch count of 64 double crochets. Going into row 10, we begin with our turning chain of 3. We are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches. So that's 2, 3, and 15. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 13 stitches. That's 2, 3, 4, and number 13. We're going to chain 2 and skip the next 2 stitches before repeating that again, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 13 stitches. And number 13 for a second time. we're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches, which will take us back to the top of our turning chain where we need to work 1 final double crochet. So work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 and I will meet you for row 11. Just working my final double crochet into the top of my turning chain, and at the end of row 10 we just have 3 open blocks this time. For row 11 we're repeating row 2 once again, so we make our turning chain of 3 and then work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. Don't forget to work that extra double crochet into the top of your turning chain, and I will meet you for row 12 in a moment. So at the end of row 11 you should still have a stitch count of 64 double crochets. We're going into row 12. We're starting with our turning chain of 3. We are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 18 stitches. That's 2, 3 and 18. We are then going to make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. That's 2, 3 and 22. We're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 18 stitches, which of course brings us back to the top of our turning chain where we need to work that additional double crochet. Don't jump ahead to row 13, we're not repeating row 2 just yet. We have another row of open blocks to work for row 13. So finish off row 12 working 1 double crochet into each of the next 18 and into the top of that turning chain work that extra double crochet, and I will meet you for row 13. So at the end of row 12 we should have 2 open blocks, and you can see they're all starting to come in to the middle of this star. For row 13 we start with our turning chain of 3. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches. That's 2, 3. Once you've worked those 15 double crochets, we chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 28. So that's 1, 2 and 3. Go into that open space, and that's number 4. So we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 28, and I'll meet you for our next open block. And 28. We make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 15 stitches, which of course brings us back to the top of our turning chain. I knew I'd done that. Don't want to work 2 into the same, do I? So that's 1 and 2. So we're working 15 double crochets back to our turning chain where we work that extra double crochet, and I will meet you for row 14. So at the end of row 13 we're already coming back out for the next points of our star. Row 14 is a repeat of row 2. So we make our turning chain of 3, and of course we're working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across, making sure we maintain our stitch count of 64. So continue across and I will meet you for row 15. So at the end of row 14 we should still have a stitch count of 64. Going into row 15 we start with our turning chain of 3. We are then working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. 3 and 12. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next, I only picked up 1 loop. We're then working 1 double crochet into each of the next 34 stitches. That's 2, 3, and 34. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. That takes us back to our turning chain, where of course we're going to work that extra double crochet. Continue across and I'll meet you for row 16. So for row 16 we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each stitch across, repeating row 2. Of course, don't forget to do your turning chain of 3. I said that backwards. And we're working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across back to our turning chain where we work that extra double crochet. That will of course maintain our stitch count of 64. So repeat row 2 for row 16 and I'll meet you for row 17. So for row 17 we start with our turning chain of 3. We're then working 1 double crochet into each of the next 9 stitches. 2, 3 and 9. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into the next. We're going to chain 2, skip 2, work 1 double crochet into the next. That's for the second time. We're going to chain 2, skip 2 before working 1 double crochet into the next for the third time. Chain 2 and skip 2. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. Just so you can see that you should have 4 open blocks by this point, all in a line. So we're going to be working 1 double crochet into each of the next 22 stitches. So for me that's 3, 4 and 22. So we're repeating this section over here now. So we work our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches, working 1 double crochet into the next, chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into the next again, chain 2, skip 2, working 1 double crochet into the next for the third time. We're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 for the final time, and this time we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 9, which takes us back to our turning chain. Of course we're going to work that extra double crochet into the top of that. So at the end of row 17 you have these lovely groups of 4 open blocks, and we're going to go straight into row 18. You might have already guessed what you're going to be doing, but we are repeating row 2 once again. So I've done my turning chain of 3 and then we are working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. So working to a lot of chain spaces this time. So work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across, and of course work that extra into the top of your turning chain to maintain your stitch count of 64, and I will meet you for row 19 in a few moments. So at the end of row 18 we've filled in all those open blocks and we're going into row 19, beginning with our turning chain of 3. We are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. That's 2. Once you've worked those 21 double crochets, we're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 16 stitches. That's 2 and 16, chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches, which will take you all the way back to your turning chain, where of course we work 1 extra double crochet, and then I'll meet you for row 20. So at the end of row 19 we are going to go straight into row 20, which once again we are repeating row 2 working our turning chain of 3 and 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. Don't forget to work into the top of that turning chain to maintain that stitch count of 64, and I'll meet you for row 21. So at the end of row 20 we can still have that stitch count of 64, making our turning chain of 3, and we are then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 24 stitches. That's 2, 3. Once you've worked those 24 double crochets, we're going to make our chain of 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 10. So that's 2 and 10. We're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 24 stitches, which of course takes us back to the top of our turning chain. Don't forget to work that additional double crochet into the top of your turning chain, and I will meet you for row 22. So once again for row 22 we are going to be repeating row 2. So we're making our turning chain of 3 and then working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across back to your original turning chain from the previous row, where we're working an additional double crochet. So I will meet you for row 23 in a few moments. So at the end of row 22 you still have your stitch count of 64. Making our turning chain for row 23, we're going to start by working 1 double crochet into each of the next 27 stitches. That's 1, 2 and 27. We chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 4. So that's 2, 3 and 4. We then chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 27, which takes us all the way back to our turning chain where we work that extra double crochet. So work those 1 double crochet into each of the next 27 and into that turning chain, and I'll meet you for rows 24 and row 25. So at the end of row 23 you should still have your stitch count of 64, and we've got just 2 open blocks. You can see what's happening. We've nearly finished our star. So for rows 24 and 25 we're repeating row 2. So we're working 2 rows of row 2 straight after each other. So we're making that turning chain of 3, then working 1 double crochet into each stitch across. So work row 24 and row 25, and I'll meet you for row 26. So once you have worked row 24 and 25, going to go into our final row of filet crochet with row 26. Made my turning chain of 3, and we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches. So that's 2, 3 and 30. We're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches once again. So continue across, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 30 stitches, and of course work that extra double crochet into the top of your turning chain, and I will meet you for row 27. So at the end of row 26 we have pretty much completed our star, and all that's left to do is rows 27, 28, 29 and 30, working a repeat of row 2. So we're going to repeat row 2 4 more times to give us a total row count of 30 rows. Double check that you do have 30 once you've worked those repeats, and each row we're working our turning chain of 3 and 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across, and of course into the top of that turning chain, making sure we maintain that stitch count of 64. Thank you so much for joining me for this tutorial to make your very own filet crochet star. And I look forward to sharing with you even more filet crochet patterns to go into your jolly holiday crochet blanket. Thank you for joining me. I will see you in the next video.